The message arrived at Earth's embassy on Kepler Station at exactly 0800 hours. Ambassador Linda Martinez stared at the holographic display floating above her desk, reading the formal summons for the third time. The words remained the same, cold and threatening in their official language. The Galactic Council hereby demands that Earth provide immediate explanation for unprovoked military actions against civilian populations on 3 separate worlds. A representative must appear before the full council within 72 standard hours to answer charges of war crimes and unauthorized aggression. Martinez felt her stomach drop. 3 years. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 3 years, and now they faced expulsion or worse. She pressed the emergency communication button connecting directly to Earth. "Get me President Harrison immediately," she told her aide, "and patch in General Lewis from Marine Command." The holographic conference room materialized around her desk. President Harrison appeared first, his gray hair disheveled as if he had been pulled from sleep. General Patricia Lewis joined seconds, later her uniform crisp despite the early hour. "Linda, what's the situation?" Harrison asked. Martinez forwarded the message. Both leaders read in silence, their faces growing darker with each line. 3 colonies attacked, Lewis said finally. Mirialan Research Station, Kadesh Mining Operation, and the Terranian Agricultural World. All showing what they claim are human military tactics. "That's impossible," Harrison said. "We haven't authorized any military action outside our solar system." "The Council doesn't believe us," Martinez replied. "They have evidence, energy weapon signatures that match our technology, battle patterns that look like our doctrine, even intercepted communications in English." Lewis leaned forward. "Someone's setting us up. But who?" The question hung in the air. Earth had made enemies quickly after joining the galactic community. The Zephyrians considered humans too aggressive. The Vorth thought human emotions made them unstable. The insectoid clack feared human individualism would spread to their perfectly ordered society. "What are our options?" Harrison asked. "We send a diplomatic team," Martinez suggested. "Lawyers, analysts, experts who can challenge their evidence." "That might work in a normal court," Lewis said. "But this is politics. They've already decided we're guilty. They're just going through the motions." Harrison rubbed his temples. "What do you recommend, General?" Lewis was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and sure. "We send 1 Marine." "1 person?" Martinez looked shocked. "Against the entire Galactic Council?" "Not just any person," Lewis continued. "We send someone who represents everything we are, not a diplomat who will dance around questions, not a lawyer who will hide behind legal language. We send a warrior who can look them in the eye and tell them exactly who we are." "That's insane," Martinez protested. "The Council expects sophisticated, political maneuvering. They'll eat a simple soldier alive." "Will they?" Lewis asked. "Or will they finally see what humanity really is? We're not the smooth-talking politicians they're used to. We're the species that fights when fighting is necessary and protects those who can't protect themselves." Harrison considered this. "Who did you have in mind?" "Staff Sergeant Jake Coleman, 15 years in the Corps, 3 combat deployments. He's seen real war, not the clean political battles these aliens are used to. More importantly, he's got something they don't understand." "Which is?" "Honor. Real honor. Not the political kind that changes based on convenience. The kind that makes a man stand up for what's right even when everyone else is against him." Martinez shook her head. "You're talking about sending 1 man against 12 alien species, each with thousands of years of political experience. I'm talking about sending 1 Marine against 12 species who think they know what humans are capable of," Lewis corrected. "They've never met anyone like Coleman." The debate continued for another hour. Military advisors joined the call, offering various strategies. Some wanted to send a full delegation. Others suggested challenging the evidence through diplomatic channels. A few even recommended withdrawing from the Council entirely rather than face certain humiliation. But Lewis held firm. "They expect us to send politicians and lawyers. They expect us to beg and make excuses. Instead, We send them a man who's never backed down from a fight in his life. We show them what humanity looks like when we're not trying to impress anyone. Finally, Harrison made his decision. Get me Coleman's file. If we're going to bet humanity's future on one man, I want to know everything about him. The file that appeared on their screens told the story of a career Marine. Born in small-town Kansas, Coleman had enlisted straight out of high school. His record showed steady promotions, commendations for bravery, and the respect of every officer who had ever commanded him. Look at this. Lewis pointed to a particular entry. Battle of Titan Station. Terrorist attack on the civilian population. Coleman's unit was pinned down, outnumbered 3-1. He single-handedly held a choke point for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. Saved 300 civilians. And here, she continued, highlighting another section, peacekeeping mission on Mars. Local warlords were using child soldiers. Coleman discovered it and reported it up the chain. When his superiors wanted to ignore it for political reasons, he threatened to go public. The mission parameters changed overnight. Harrison studied the record. He's not afraid to stand up to authority. He's not afraid of anything, Lewis said. That's what makes him perfect for this. The Council is counting on us being intimidated by their power and their history. Coleman won't be impressed by any of that. He'll see through their games and call them on it. But can he actually prove our innocence? Martinez asked. If anyone can, it's him, Lewis replied. Coleman doesn't just fight battles, he studies them. He understands tactics better than most officers twice his rank. If there's something wrong with their evidence, he'll find it. The decision was made. Within 6 hours, Staff Sergeant Jake Coleman received orders that would change his life and possibly determine humanity's future in the galaxy. He was to report for immediate deployment to Kepler Station, where he would face the combined might of the Galactic Council with nothing but his training, his experience, and his unshakable belief in doing what was right. Coleman read his orders twice, then packed his dress uniform and a small bag of personal items. He didn't ask questions or request additional support. When Earth needed someone to stand up for humanity, Marines answered the call. It was as simple as that. As his transport lifted, off from Earth, carrying him toward what might be the most important battle of his career, Coleman reviewed the evidence against humanity one more time. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't put his finger on what. The attacks were too clean, too perfect. Real battles were messy, chaotic things that never went according to plan. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he had a more immediate concern, representing his entire species before judges who had already decided humanity was guilty. For most people, it would be an impossible task. For a Marine, it was just another day at the office. The transport ship New Horizon cut through space toward Kepler Station, carrying Jake Coleman toward the most important mission of his life. The ship's captain, a gruff man named Peters, had offered Coleman the best quarters available, but the Marine chose a simple cabin near the crew deck instead. Coleman spent his first day aboard studying the evidence against humanity. The files showed 3 devastating attacks, each one blamed on human forces. The Muriel Research Station had been hit first, its laboratories destroyed and 50 scientists killed. The Kadesh mining operation came next, with entire mining complexes reduced to rubble. Finally, the Terranian agricultural world suffered attacks that destroyed food production facilities and left thousands hungry. Each attack showed the same pattern. Precise strikes against key targets, perfect timing that caught defenders off guard, complete tactical superiority that ended fights before they could truly begin. The evidence pointed to human involvement, energy weapon signatures that matched Earth's military technology, battle plans that looked like they came from human doctrine, and intercepted radio communications in English. But something bothered Coleman about the reports. He had seen real battles fought in actual wars. Combat was never this clean. Real fights were messy affairs where plans fell apart and soldiers had to adapt on the fly. These attacks looked too perfect, like someone had planned them down to the smallest detail. On his second day, Coleman joined the ship's mixed crew for meals in the common area. The New Horizon carried both humans and aliens, giving him his first real chance to understand how other species viewed humanity. The ship's engineer was a Zephyrian, named Koltar, whose blue-scaled skin and multiple arms made him perfect for working in tight spaces. During dinner, Koltar spoke freely about human reputation in the galaxy. "Your species fights too much," Koltar said, his translator device giving his words a mechanical tone. "Always conflict, always war. Other species live in peace for centuries. Humans cannot go 10 years without shooting someone. Sometimes fighting is necessary," Coleman replied calmly. "When someone threatens innocent people, what choice do you have?" "There is always choice," Koltar insisted. "Negotiation, compromise, peace through understanding." Coleman thought about the children he had saved on Titan Station, the ones who would have died if he had chosen negotiation over action. What if someone breaks into your home and threatens your family? Do you negotiate with them? Koltar looked uncomfortable. "That is different. That is personal defense." "No," Coleman said. "It's the same thing on a larger scale. Someone attacks innocent people. You stop them. That's what soldiers do." The conversation was overheard by HFY, a crystalline Vorth whose body looked like living glass. The Vorth communicated through changes in color and light patterns, requiring a more sophisticated translator. "Human emotions are dangerous," HFY's device announced. "Anger leads to violence. Fear leads to aggression. Logic should guide all decisions. Emotions also lead to courage," Coleman pointed out. "Love makes people protect their families. Compassion makes them help strangers. You can't have one without the other." "Inefficient," HFY replied, its crystal body flashing red. "Emotions cloud judgment. Better to remove them entirely." Coleman studied the alien's translucent form. "Without emotions, what's the point of living? Why protect anything if you don't care about it? Why build anything if you don't love it?" The question seemed to confuse HFY, who stopped responding and moved away from the conversation. The most interesting discussion came with Tikcha, one of the insectoid clack who served as the ship's communications officer. Unlike his hive-minded species, Tikcha had spent years working alongside humans and had developed something resembling individual thoughts. "Your species troubles the clack greatly," Tikcha said, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. "Each human thinks different thoughts, makes different choices. This creates chaos, unpredictability." "That's what makes us strong," Coleman said. "When one plan fails, someone else thinks of a new one. When one person can't solve a problem, another person tries a different approach. But how do you coordinate? How do you work together when everyone has different ideas?" Coleman smiled. "We argue a lot. We debate. We disagree. But when it matters, when people are in danger, we put aside our differences and work as a team." Tikcha's compound eyes reflected the overhead lights as he considered this. The hive mind is efficient. All think the same thoughts, work toward the same goals. But if the hive mind is wrong about something, all are wrong together. "Exactly," Coleman said. "Human diversity means we're more likely to find the right answer, even if it takes longer to agree on it." These conversations gave Coleman valuable insight into galactic politics. The other species had grown comfortable with their long-established ways of thinking. Humans, as the newcomers, threatened their settled worldview simply by existing. On the third day, the New Horizon arrived at Kepler Station. The massive structure hung in space like a metallic flower, its multiple arms extending in all directions to accommodate different species' needs. Docking bays for various ship designs, atmospheric processors for different breathing requirements, and gravity generators adjusted for multiple planetary conditions. Captain Roy Mitchell met Coleman at the airlock. Mitchell had been Earth's military attaché for 2 years, long enough to understand the complex politics of the galactic community. "Sergeant Coleman," Mitchell said, returning Coleman's salute, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "What's the situation, sir?" Mitchell led Coleman through the station's corridors, past groups of aliens from a dozen different worlds. "The Council is convinced humanity is guilty. Chancellor Vexatar of the Hegemony has been pushing for human restrictions since we joined. He sees this as his chance to put us in our place." "What about allies?" "Few and quiet. Counselor Merdak of the Torvani has been supportive, but he can't be seen helping us too openly. The others are either hostile or neutral, which amounts to the same thing. They passed through a security checkpoint staffed by Zephyrian guards who studied Coleman with obvious suspicion. His military bearing and confident stride marked him as exactly the kind of human they feared most. The proceedings start tomorrow, Mitchell continued. Arbiter Ziloth will oversee the trial. He's ancient even by galactic standards and supposedly fair, but he's also traditional, which doesn't work in our favor. They reached Coleman's assigned quarters, a small but functional space near the embassy section. Mitchell handed him a data pad containing detailed information about each council member. Study these tonight, Mitchell advised. Know who you're dealing with. Some of them have been making galactic policy since before humans discovered fire. Coleman took the pad and nodded. Any advice, sir? Mitchell paused at the door. Don't try to be something you're not. They expect us to send politicians who will grovel and make excuses. You're here because you represent something different. Show them what a real human looks like. After Mitchell left, Coleman spent the evening reviewing the council member profiles. 12 species, each with their own agenda and prejudices. Most had already decided humanity was guilty. His job was not just to prove their innocence, but to change minds that had been made up before he even arrived. He cleaned and pressed his dress uniform, checking every detail. Tomorrow he would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, wearing nothing but his medals and his conviction that truth would prevail. For the first time in his career, Coleman was going into battle without weapons, without backup, and without any guarantee of victory. But he had something the Council didn't expect. A Marine's unshakable belief that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the odds. The next morning would determine not just his fate, but the future of humanity among the stars. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Coleman stood at the entrance, taking in the massive circular room that stretched up toward a domed ceiling, painted with star maps from across the galaxy. 12 raised platforms arranged in a perfect circle, each one adapted for a different alien species. At the center sat a single chair, isolated and exposed under harsh lighting. Coleman walked to the center chair with steady steps, his dress blues immaculate, every medal and ribbon in perfect position. He did not hurry or hesitate. When he reached the chair, he came to attention and waited. The silence stretched for long minutes as the council members studied him. Arbiter Ziloth spoke first. The ancient being looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and glowing eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. His voice carried the weight of centuries. Staff Sergeant Jake Coleman of Earth, you stand before this council to answer charges of war crimes committed by your species. How do you respond to these accusations? I am here to discover the truth, sir, Coleman replied. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Chancellor Vexitar rose from his platform. The reptilian hegemony leader's scales gleamed under the lights as he activated the holographic display surrounding Coleman's chair. Images of destruction filled the air around him. Behold the evidence of human aggression, Vexitar announced. 3 peaceful colonies attacked without provocation. 53 dead at the Mirialan research station. The Kadesh mining operation completely destroyed. Food production facilities on the Terranian world reduced to rubble, leaving thousands hungry. The holographic displays showed the aftermath of each attack: smoking ruins, destroyed equipment, and the cold efficiency of military precision. Coleman studied each image carefully, his expression never changing. The evidence is overwhelming, Vexitar continued. Energy weapon signatures match human military technology exactly. Battle patterns follow human tactical doctrine. Intercepted communications were in your Earth language English. More displays activated, showing technical analysis and comparison charts. The weapon signatures did match human designs. The tactical approaches looked familiar to anyone who had studied Earth's military history. Furthermore, Vexitar said, his voice rising with theatrical emphasis, these attacks show the same ruthless efficiency that characterizes human warfare throughout your species' history. The same disregard for civilian life that marked your planetary conflicts. Coleman listened to every word, every accusation. When Vexitar finished, the chamber fell silent again. All eyes focused on the lone human sitting in the center of their circle. "Are you prepared to offer humanity's defense?" Arbiter Zeloth asked. Coleman stood up slowly. "I request permission to examine the attack sites personally." The request sent murmurs through the chamber. Several council members spoke at once in their various languages before Vextar's translator could process their words. "That is highly irregular," Vexitar protested. "The evidence has been thoroughly examined by our best investigators. With respect, Chancellor, your investigators looked for evidence that humans were guilty. I want to look for evidence of what actually happened. Counselor." Murdoch of the Torvani leaned forward. The slug-like being spoke in slow, measured tones. "What do you hope to find that our experts missed?" Coleman met Murdoch's gaze steadily. "I've been in real battles, Counselor. I know what combat actually looks like. These reports show something different." "Different how?" Arbiter Zeloth asked. "Too clean, too perfect. Real battles are chaotic. Plans fall apart. Equipment fails. Soldiers make mistakes. But these attacks went exactly according to plan, with no complications, no setbacks, no unexpected problems." Vexitar's scales flashed with anger. "Are you suggesting our investigation was inadequate?" "I'm suggesting that whoever did this wanted it to look like human work. They studied our tactics, copied our weapon signatures, and even used our language. But they made it too perfect. Real human operations never go that smoothly." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members seemed intrigued by Coleman's logic, while others dismissed it as desperate human lies. Arbiter Zeloth raised a gnarled limb for silence. "You have 48 hours to conduct your investigation, Sergeant Coleman, but you will be accompanied by council observers at all times." "Understood, sir." Coleman's first stop was the Mirielin Research Station. The facility orbited a gas giant, its laboratories dedicated to atmospheric research. The attack had come without warning, destroying 3 lab sections and killing everyone inside. Coleman walked through the wreckage with Dr. Yantel, a Vorth scientist who had led the original investigation. The crystalline being's body pulsed with different colors as it explained what they had found. The attackers knew exactly which sections to target, Dr. Yantel reported. They avoided the central power core, which would have destroyed the entire station. "Very precise, very professional." Coleman knelt next to blast marks on the metal bulkhead. "Too precise. Look at these weapon impacts. They're perfectly spaced, exactly the right depth to penetrate the hull without causing explosive decompression." "What does that suggest?" "It suggests someone who knew the station's construction details perfectly, not just the general layout, but the exact thickness of the hull plating, the location of support beams, the position of atmospheric seals." He moved to another section where debris had been carefully arranged for examination. "And look at this. The evidence is too convenient. This piece of human technology, this fragment of Earth-manufactured equipment, it's all sitting right where investigators would find it. You think it was planted? I think someone wanted us to find it." The second site was the Kadesh mining operation, a massive complex built into an asteroid. Here Coleman found more inconsistencies. The attackers had destroyed mining equipment, but left the valuable ore untouched. They had targeted communication systems, but avoided the reactor that powered the entire operation. "This is wrong," Coleman told his escorts. "If humans were raiding this place, we'd take the valuable ore. If we were trying to destroy it completely, we'd target the reactor." Instead, the attackers hit just enough to make it look like a military strike. At the third site, the Terranian agricultural world, Coleman discovered the most damning evidence of all. In the ruins of a food processing plant, he found traces of advanced technology that no human ship carried. "What is that?" asked Commander Rixco, the CLAC officer observing Coleman's investigation. Coleman carefully extracted a small device from the debris. "Shape-shifting stabilizer, used to maintain altered physical forms over long periods. That technology belongs to the Zerathi," Rixco said, his mandibles clicking with surprise. Coleman nodded grimly. "The same Zerathi who need new colonies because their homeworld is dying. The same Zerathi who can't get council approval to relocate existing populations." The pieces were falling into place. The Zerathi had the motive, the technology, and the opportunity to frame humanity. Their shape-shifting abilities would let them impersonate human soldiers. Their advanced biotechnology could replicate human weapon signatures, but proving it would be the hardest battle of Coleman's career. The Zarathi had been council members for over 1,000 years. They were master politicians with centuries of experience in galactic diplomacy. Going up against them would require more than evidence. It would require a strategy that turned their own strengths against them. Coleman spent his final 12 hours preparing for the confrontation that would determine humanity's future. He reviewed every piece of evidence, studied every inconsistency, and planned his approach with the same careful attention to detail that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. When he returned to the council chamber, he carried with him not just proof of human innocence, but evidence of a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of galactic government. The real battle was about to begin. Coleman's improvised club caught the first Zarathi agent across the shoulder, sending the shapeshifter stumbling backward. The alien's arm immediately began reforming, healing the damage, but Coleman was already moving to his next target. Ew. Marine had learned long ago that in outnumbered fights you never stopped moving. Stay in one place and your enemies could surround you. Keep moving and they had to chase you, breaking their coordination. He dove under Sithak's slashing attack, rolled past another agent's grab, and came up near the chamber's control console. His fingers found the environmental controls cranking the temperature down to its lowest setting. "What are you doing?" Sithak demanded, his breath already starting to fog in the rapidly cooling air. "Evening the odds," Coleman replied. Zarathi, shapeshifting required enormous amounts of energy. Cold temperatures forced their bodies to work harder to maintain altered forms. It wouldn't stop them, but it would slow them down. Coleman grabbed a metal support strut that had broken off from one of the display platforms. It made a better weapon than debris with reach and balance. He tested its weight quickly, then faced the 4 agents closing in on him. "Protect the council members," he called out to anyone who might be listening. "Find cover and stay down." The Zarathi came at him from different angles, trying to use their superior numbers. But the council chamber worked against them. The raised platforms created obstacles that broke their coordination. Coleman used every piece of furniture, every architectural feature as either weapon or shield. When one agent tried to corner him behind Arbiter Ziloth's platform, Coleman vaulted over the ancient tree being and landed on the agent's back. His metal rod found the base of the Zarathi's skull, stunning the creature long enough for Coleman to grab a more dangerous weapon. The agent's belt carried energy tools designed for sabotage. Coleman liberated a plasma cutter, its beam capable of slicing through metal bulkheads. Now he had something that could match Zarathi healing abilities. "You cannot win, human," Sithak called out, staying back while his agents pressed the attack. "Even if you defeat us here, more of my people control the station's vital systems." Coleman ducked another slashing attack and returned fire with the plasma cutter. The beam caught the agent in the chest, burning through shape-shifted tissue faster than it could regenerate. The Zarathi fell, his form reverting to its natural state. "Maybe," Coleman replied, moving to engage the next target. "But I'm going to make you earn it." The second agent tried a different approach, shape-shifting his arms into whip-like tentacles that could strike from a distance. Coleman had to stay mobile, using the chamber's architecture to break line of sight and limit the alien's reach. He noticed that Counselor Murdak had moved to a secondary control panel near his platform. The Torvani's slug-like form made him slow, but his multiple appendages let him work several controls at once. Emergency lights flickered as Murdak accessed station systems. "What are you doing, Counselor?" Sithak demanded. "What I should have done years ago," Murdak replied, standing up to bullies. The Torvani had activated the station's emergency communication system, broadcasting Coleman's evidence to every ship in the sector. The Zarathi conspiracy was now public knowledge across multiple star systems. Sithak roared in rage and lunged at Murdak, but Coleman intercepted him. The 2 combatants crashed into each other near the chamber's center, rolling across the floor in a deadly embrace. Sithak's body kept shifting, growing claws, developing armor-like skin, changing tactics with each transformation. But Coleman had something the Zarathi didn't understand. the ability to adapt without changing his fundamental nature. He used Sithak's shifting against him, anticipating the changes and striking at moments when the alien was between forms. The plasma cutter found its mark, burning deep into Sithak's torso. The Zarathi leader fell back, his form flickering unstably as his shape-shifting abilities failed. The remaining two agents hesitated, seeing their leader wounded and their mission exposed. In that moment of doubt, Coleman struck. The plasma cutter swept in wide arcs, keeping both aliens at bay while he moved toward the chamber's emergency controls. "Station security to council chambers," came a voice over the communication system. "We've regained control of the outer sections. Hold your positions." Coleman smiled grimly. "Sounds like your people failed, Sithak." The Zarathi leader struggled to his feet, his form barely holding together. "This changes nothing. My people still need colonies. The council will still have to deal with refugee populations." "You're right," Coleman said, lowering his weapon slightly. "The Zarathi do need help, but you went about it the wrong way. Instead of asking for assistance, you chose deception and murder. The council would never have approved forced relocations," Sithak protested. "You never asked for voluntary relocations. You never proposed joint colonies. You never tried cooperation." Coleman's voice carried clearly through the chamber. "You assumed violence was the only solution because that's how you think." The main doors finally unlocked as security forces overrode the lockdown. Station guards poured into the chamber, weapons drawn and ready. The surviving Zarathi agents surrendered immediately, their mission a complete failure. Captain Mitchell entered, with the security team, his eyes quickly assessing the situation. "Sergeant Coleman, report." "Mission accomplished, sir. The conspiracy has been exposed and the real attackers identified." Coleman gestured toward the wounded Sithak. "The Zarathi planned to frame humanity and claim our colonies as refugee settlements. As though medical teams treated the wounded and security processed the prisoners, the council members slowly emerged from behind their platforms. They looked at Coleman with expressions ranging from gratitude to amazement. Arbiter Zealoth approached the Marine directly. "Sergeant Coleman, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for the charges brought against humanity. Your investigation and courage have revealed a deception that threatened the very foundation of our alliance. Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." "No," the ancient arbiter said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "You did far more than that. You showed us what humanity truly represents. Not the primitive warmongers some believed you to be, but a species capable of extraordinary courage in defense of truth and justice." Chancellor Vextar, who had been so eager to condemn humanity, now approached with obvious embarrassment. "Sergeant Coleman, I owe you and your species a personal apology. My prejudice blinded me to the real threat. Prejudice is something we all have to fight, Chancellor. The important thing is learning from it." As the immediate crisis ended, Coleman found himself surrounded by council members who wanted to thank him personally. But his thoughts were already turning toward home and the report he would have to write. The final proceedings took place 3 days later. The Zarathi conspiracy was fully exposed, with evidence presented to the entire galactic community. Sithak and his agents faced charges of war crimes and terrorism. The real attackers had been identified and would face justice. More importantly, humanity's position in the Galactic Council was not just restored, but strengthened. The other species had seen what humans could accomplish when fighting for something they believed in. Coleman stood before the Council one final time, receiving formal commendations from multiple species. But the words that mattered most came from Arbiter Zealoth. "The galaxy is safer because of what you did here, Sergeant Coleman. You proved that sometimes the best diplomat is a warrior who refuses to back down from doing what's right." Coleman returned to Earth as a hero, but he carried with him something more valuable than medals or recognition. He had shown the galaxy that humanity deserved its place among the stars, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to stand up for justice even when standing alone. The Marine had done what Marines do best. He had protected the innocent and defended the truth no matter what the cost. In doing so, he had secured humanity's future among the stars. Coleman stood before the full council again, but this time he was not the defendant. The evidence bag in his hand contained proof that would change everything. Arbiter Ziloth gestured for him to begin his presentation. "Honorable council members," Coleman said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I have completed my investigation. The evidence shows that humanity did not commit these attacks." Chancellor Vexitar's scales rippled with anger. "More human lies. You cannot simply deny the evidence we have presented." "I'm not denying your evidence, Chancellor. I'm showing you what it really means." Coleman activated the holographic display system. "Let me walk you through what actually happened at each site." The first image showed the Mirialan research station. Coleman highlighted specific areas with a laser pointer. The attackers knew exactly which sections to hit. They avoided the power core that would have destroyed the station completely. They knew the exact thickness of hull plating, the location of support structures, even the position of emergency seals. "That proves human involvement," Vexitar insisted. "Humans are known for their tactical precision." "No, Chancellor. It proves the attackers had detailed construction blueprints, not just general layouts but engineering specifications that only the builders would have." Coleman switched to another image. "And look at this convenient placement of evidence. Human technology fragments sitting exactly where investigators would find them." Counselor Murdoch spoke up. "What are you suggesting, Sergeant?" "Someone wanted you to find that evidence. Real battles don't leave convenient proof sitting around. Equipment gets scattered, destroyed, buried under debris. This evidence was placed deliberately." Coleman moved to the second attack site. The Osmurs Kadesh mining operation shows the same pattern. Valuable ore left untouched. Communication systems destroyed, but the main reactor left intact. If humans were raiding this place, we'd take the ore. If we wanted to destroy it, we'd hit the reactor. He could see doubt creeping into some council members' expressions. The logic was sound, and even the most biased observers had to acknowledge the inconsistencies. "But the most damning evidence," Coleman continued, "comes from the Terranian agricultural world." He held up the small device he had found in the debris. "This is a shape-shifting stabilizer, technology that maintains altered physical forms over extended periods." The chamber fell silent. Every council member knew what that device meant. Commander Rixco, the CLAC officer who had observed Coleman's investigation, stepped forward. "I can confirm that Sergeant Coleman found this device in the ruins of the food processing plant. The technology signature matches Zarathi design specifications." All eyes turned to the Zarathi section of the council. Ambassador Sithak sat motionless, his normally fluid features frozen in what might have been surprise or calculation. "This proves nothing," Sithak said finally. "That device could have been planted by anyone seeking to implicate my people." Coleman nodded. "You're right, Ambassador. One device proves nothing. That's why I dug deeper." He activated new displays showing genetic analysis results. "I also found biological traces at each attack site, microscopic samples that your investigators missed because they weren't looking for them. The new evidence showed DNA fragments that didn't match any known human patterns. Instead, they showed the telltale signs of recent shape-shifting activity." "The Zarathi homeworld is dying," Coleman continued, his voice steady and factual. "Your people need new colonies desperately, but council law prevents forced relocation of existing populations, so you created a plan to frame humanity, get us expelled from the council, and then move into our abandoned colonies as humanitarian relief." Siasik's form began to shift slightly, his calm facade cracking. "These are wild accusations based on circumstantial evidence." "Then you won't mind submitting to a genetic scan," Coleman said. "Recent shape-shifting leaves biological markers that can be detected for several weeks. If you've been maintaining alternate forms, the scan will show it." The challenge hung in the air like a physical presence. Every council member understood what Coleman was asking. A genetic scan would prove or disprove Zarathi involvement definitively. Sithiak hesitated for just a moment too long. "I refuse to submit to such an invasive procedure based on human speculation." That refusal was as good as a confession. Murmurs spread through the chamber as council members began to grasp the implications of what Coleman had revealed. But the Zarathi were not finished. Sithak touched a hidden control on his platform, sending a coded signal throughout Kepler Station. Within seconds, alarms began blaring as emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the facility. "Security breach in council chambers," came the automated announcement. "Station entering lockdown protocol." The chamber's main doors sealed with heavy mechanical locks. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red shadows. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Coleman could see Zarathi infiltrators moving through the station corridors. "Sleeper agents," Coleman realized. "You've had people planted here for months." Sithak's form was changing now, his diplomatic appearance melting away to reveal the true Zarathi underneath. Stronger, faster, and equipped with biotechnology that turned his body into a weapon. The plan was perfect, Sithak snarled, his voice no longer needing the translator device. Humanity would be blamed, expelled, destroyed. My people would claim your colonies as refugee settlements. The council would approve it out of guilt for what happened to the innocent Zarathi. Other Zarathi agents were entering the chamber, now having bypassed security systems they had studied for months. They moved with inhuman speed and coordination, their bodies shifting and adapting as needed. "But you had to interfere," Sithak continued, advancing toward Coleman, one primitive human soldier threatening centuries of careful planning. Coleman stood his ground as the alien approached. Around the chamber, council members cowered behind their platforms or called uselessly for security forces that couldn't reach them through the locked doors. "You made one mistake," Coleman said calmly. "What mistake?" Sithak demanded. Coleman smiled grimly. "You assumed one Marine couldn't make a difference." The Zarathi agent lunged forward with inhuman speed, his arm morphing into a blade-like appendage. But Coleman was already moving, his combat training taking over. He rolled aside as the blade cut through the air where his head had been, came up behind a council platform and assessed his tactical situation. No weapons. No backup. Trapped in a sealed chamber with hostile aliens who could reshape their bodies at will. The council members he was supposed to protect were helpless civilians with no combat experience. For most people, it would have been a hopeless situation. For a Marine who had spent 15 years learning to adapt and overcome, it was just another day at the office. Coleman grabbed a piece of debris from the damaged display system, hefting it like a club. "Council members, get behind the farthest platforms and stay down. This is about to get messy." The real battle was just beginning. Everything that had happened before was just politics. Now it came down to what Marines did best, protecting innocent people against overwhelming odds. Sithak and his agents spread out to surround Coleman, their bodies continuing to shift and adapt. They had planned for every contingency except one. They had never faced a human warrior who refused to give up. "Last chance, human," Sithak called out. "Surrender now, and we might let some of the council members live." Coleman's response was simple and direct. He charged straight at the nearest agent, improvised weapon raised, ready to show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of when fighting for something that mattered.